I'm not trying to be in the deep primordial sense of things and try to make it as prolific as possible. That what makes it is great work rate, great chemistry, a little story behind it, and characters that I know that can make the match really interesting, plus a reaction. That's some people's distinction of some side of this. I don't know how you can define it over a literal pandemic, controlling most of the crowd reaction. So that's one of the negatives that come out of defining if a match is actually getting everybody's alley or not. And then you go to WhatCulture.com. Now, I have nothing against a journalistic group, especially a group that hasn't been relevant since 2016 to 17 that boosts over its you know, charismatic and actually interesting character group that critiqued most of its wrestling, and at least for a small semblance made it popular because of Bullet Club and their dumb memes they did around the wrestling fan base. That's practically it. And then you head over to their top 10 damn lists over what they do for the shows, and now AEW's engulfed in. If this wasn't involving AEW, if AEW wasn't a thing in 2020 from 2019, 75% of the list would be a majorial amount of freaking New Japan matches, G1 climaxes. That sounds like how a robot freaking, you know, secretes the sauce. Other than that, I I don't know what to tell you. Somehow, and I understand having a favorite wrestling match is subjective. These guys don't critique the spots. What primitively made the match a bit interesting, other than they'll go over a small little tidbit of it, or they'll just think over all because of the certain situation that they're in. They don't critique if the match was actually interesting, if it was well timed as it is, or if it was that, if it really was, a good match that they can remember for a long time. Because I'll admit it, I have my own favorite matches. I don't put them in the damn list because everybody else does it. And we come over with Minoru Suzuki versus Jon Moxley. Listen, I understand there's different slang other than in WWE, so I'm not gonna act ignorant as hell. But who in the hell watches New Japan? Over the majorial said that they'll actually go Shiozaki versus uh, Takahashi Sugiura and Pro Wrestling Noah. That NXT UK match I had Walter looking like an overgrown baby, pimp slapping everybody in the chest. I think the Okada and freaking Coach match that I watched it. And when I mean I watched it, I watched the full match earlier in the year, and then I watched a suppressed highlight of it. And I don't know what's wrong with you people, and I understand it's a different point of view, but all because you came slapping each other for 40 minutes with instant pile drivers that you don't even know the decisive finish unless. And literally, this is what they said. This is what they generally ask for, because usually, if a guy is not giving up in the match because of energy of the crowd, he can run saying Okada didn't want to lose because he found something inside himself so hard he gave one more rainmaker clothesline. These guys are doing this like they're mixing Premier League with freaking Dragon Ball Z. Like it's one of those weirdo fan channels that make those like freaking conspiracy videos on anime and go over the lore from a show that ended over 20 years ago. Look, I love Dragon Ball Z, and I was a kid, so I wanted to make my what if scenarios. What if Vegeta came in to Earth before Goku? Uh, how if Oob ever turned evil? I do dumb crap like that. I was a kid. I always wanted to do what if scenarios like any other person should because they're a fan of a fan base. But what kind of journalism is this? You don't want to sum up most of the match because I think it clocked in at over 47 minutes. I swear, there was so many botched over spots. there was a there was a counter over the Rainmaker clothesline that came up with him trying to do a Pele kick, a double Pele kick, mind you. So I don't know if he was supposed to move up to a pile driver. He just drilled his ass on that head. Then he came over to kick, then kick and kicking and kicking and kicking and kicking. It's alive and kicking. That's not how the song went, but I love non-point, so I'm gonna leave it there. On the other hand, I still don't understand what makes you guys that enticed that all because it was like two Japanese skinny fat dudes kicking the piss out of each other with a semblance of the story other than they want the title makes a lick of no sense to me. The match wasn't that enticing. Sure, you got to see a cool move. I mean, the only cool spot I had was a drop kick and a midair caught Liger bomb from the top. I mean, sit down power bomb. That was it. Like no semblance of telling a story for a majority of this. They're doing this for the likability of wrestling. The 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 stadium stampede was in this dumbass list. That it was just a bunch of BTE humor in the midst of just these two factions that really got a semblance of a story other than the biggest thing Inner Circle did over that time was feuding with John Moxley. It's just pure crap. Sure, I liked Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles match back on SmackDown, but it was a fair match. They had better matches anyway. Somehow, the matches involving Jey Uso and Roman Reigns, that the most compelled, emotional, conflicted storylines that probably had many viewers conflicting over getting against Roman Reigns, knowing what he was doing was wrong, going beyond family, and making himself the head of the table, actually conflicting emotional standpoint and get you to see what Roman didn't even win off a rear naked, off a spear or a Superman punch. He literally swerved his own cousin and gave his ass a rear naked choke after threatening Jimmy. That's storytelling. That's compelling. That's actually giving you something memorable for the year. With a dumbass Inferno match that wasn't even that impressive in the first place. That the Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins wasn't a bad match at any stands. I actually enjoyed it, and I get it. Those are my own opinions for matches I thought were interesting this year. Culture has a right because it's a subjective list. But by God, I just feel like these are some smarky opinions over guys that think that pro wrestling is like the in Premier League. Like Young Bucks, FTR against the Lucha Bros and freaking Butcher and Blade. I swear to God, if you read their art, you don't even have to go over their cringy lack of wit and humor and quick little jabs, crappy centerpieces, and just terrible transitions. These guys suck at videos now because they have a lack of like a personality group, and at least even though fan bases like still hated WhatCulture because they were completely smarky, at least they knew okay they have a bit of a personality. You can see why people could like Blompiad, why people could like Jack, why people could like Simon the King, all that garbage. They got nobody now except Simon. This was a skeleton multi-man spot fest, never stopped peaking, and served a wide storyline purpose, immaculatingly doubling as a thread to develop a long-term FTR and Young Bucks rivalry. They teamed together here to phase one FTR's plan to shatter the Elite from within. This match, level beyond exhilarating, also furthered the idea of the grand philosophical saga of FTR's old school triumph. Yeah, old school. That's why, like in their Young Bucks match, I tried, 450 splash, their own Meltzer driver, running drop kicks, Canadian destroyers. Like they still do the same Lucha strong style. The only thing different of the old school Like they try to bring this, like they pretend, like I get the look and I get the motif that they're supposed to be this retro, old school rip-off brainbuster tag team, and that's all well and fine. You can do something like that. It's cool to make a new school, old school type tag team or wrestler. It's been done before and it's fine. It works. It's hypocritical though. Wouldn't that mean they have to slower their pace? They barely have any impactful moves, and most of what they have is ripping off other wrestlers. And the only interesting thing they do in their tag matches is just isolate the wrestler over the tag team. You mean any other tag team can do that? The match was over a spot fest. I think all four guys went for topes or a top gun hello from the top. I'm not trying to completely hate, but the same thing happened, I think, when the Young Bucks tagged with the Jurassic Express. And we had freaking Marco Stunt over the shoulder of one of the Young Bucks doing a Canadian Destroyer. That's not cool. That is fucking dangerous. That's dumb. It's ridiculous. That was super high risk. It was unnecessary, and it just looked like it was just a premiere indie show with an expensive budget. That's not a good look over your company. It makes your side utter bush league, and it just doesn't feel realistic. Nobody, after trying to piss like if you see a dude off your shoulder that's also your enemy, you'd kind of want to push him over to the ring with the other young buck. And guess what? Freaking Canadian Destroyer from the middle rope. This is something that I agree with at least. We had the Best Friends versus Santana and Ortiz in their back in parking lot brawl on Dynamite. It was a really brutal match. The only thing that ruined it for me was they were still trying to make it comedic. Like, you're trying to make men that hold each other's hands all the time be like badasses. And at least for that, they were getting bled. They were doing pile drivers on trucks, hitting each other off windows. Santana Ortiz finally looking cool for once, because since being part of the Inner Circle, they were just comedic relief for Jericho. That pregnant, fat-willed stepmom. That just, dude, you see why people just absolutely bombed on him on Twitter. And I'm a huge fan of Chris Jericho. If there's a reason why I get better talking, or how I got more vocal when I was older, I gotta thank Chris Jericho for that. But yeah, the match was good. It was a faulty finish. They should have just had a better creative way to win. And of course, Walter versus Elijah Dragunov. I never got to watch this dumb match. I just thought it was just a ripoff of the Tyler Bates and Walter match that they had a year prior. Everybody started reacting to it. It was just slap, slap, kick out. It's just the same match. It's just breaking a short dude's neck while the big fat dude just comes around beating the ever living metal piss out of this. And people still think that's like a UK developmental circuit, because of course most of these Euro guys can't get over. No disrespect, obviously there's been Euro guys that gotten over, of course Regal and Wade Barrett, but God. Of course we got the Pac versus Kenny Omega Iron Man match that they had February 26th of Dynamite. Before I think, I think before Revolution of that month. Revolution I think will also be at the 26th come next year. Hopefully, I don't know if they're still going to have crowds, but I think crowds will help at the AEW. At this standpoint, just God, why? Why in God's name do they continue with this BS? It was just bicycle knee. Bicycle knee. There was a decent counter over for a DDT on the outside. The match was just continued schlock, bro. They continue to not understand what's going to be newer fan bases. And guess what? Sometimes wrestling fans be worse than anime fans. And the standpoint of they isolate the newer viewers. You don't do that when you're trying to get, especially when you're, something like pro wrestling that hasn't been mainstream since 2001. It hasn't been in the semblance of at least a public, conversation unless you're with a certain group of friends or at least a community. And I'm saying that there are like these old wrestling fans, and you have something like Kota Ibushi versus Okada that I already talked about. I'm talking about it. It was just a 45 just slap fest of absolute nothing storytelling except these guys just no selling, no selling, wasteful falling and just pretending. Now this is a match I wanted to go over because that was number 3. This is number 2. FTR versus the Young Bucks at Full Gear this year. Now I have the privilege and the absolute opportunity to review the whole pay-per-view in this match. And I gotta tell you, man, something's really up with you people. Like, probably, yes, if you're an AEW fan, you like these guys going all out, I get it. No pun intended. Other than that, the match was just schlock. It was 35 minutes of the false finishing and inconsistency of selling. The finish was who's gonna win it more. They limited one half of the Young Bucks super kicks, even though they can do a knee now that's a finish. And they limited over the Meltzer driver. They did a second rope little pile driver that got a near fall, a running spear for a near fall, a running off the apron. Then there was a counter after he missed a 450 to go for a super kick, and that was the finish. That went over as shorter as the damn match. This whole conversation about this top 10 list is shorter than the whole damn match. Over the shelling point of ripping off older guys' finishers, like this is a revolution of tag team wrestling. I understand the whole focus over tag team wrestling, and I understand that FTR has no charisma over the standpoint of things, or at least an essential personality, other than they're just wrestlers with old school motifs. That's it. And it was just a match that I felt like you can just have any other guy take their spots and it could have been a fine match. Just a forgettable indie schlock, no sell, rip finisher over finisher, rip off over finisher, counter off one on one. Like that was like the zinc of like no pop energy. It was just something you saw Pro Wrestling Guerrilla for like $25. I'd rather see the Bashams make like an unnecessary appearance on SmackDown. The next thing, I reviewed Revolution as well, folks. Dude, nothing was interesting about this tag team match. And yes, I understand this is my point of view. Please don't take this personally. If you like this match, I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed something I didn't. So that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to hate on you for that. This is just my opinion. And this is just the centralizing of lack of, journalism, or at least a critique over what the made this match interesting over the storyline motif of bonds breaking and the Hangman and Kenny having something to prove, even though the Young Bucks were supposed to win the tag team titles. And it was just, I think they still finished it with the like the weirdest finisher for both singles competitors. And it was just the V trigger plus the buckshot lariat. It looked a bit off-putting. I think they also tried the BTE trigger. The match just dragged over the standpoint, and just like the last 4 minutes at least had a semblance of telling a tiny bit over a story from over 2 months of dragging over. This list was complete garbage. You're going over a list of matches that I understand that you probably want people outside of WWE, or at least something people actually watch consistently, even Impact, to at least go outside their comfort zone and watch some of this. Just from the standpoint of people actually care about, especially over your critiques, over talking about a pro wrestling match like it's freaking Premier League, and it boggles my mind. It gets me confused. And they just talk about just the work rate or the dumb forgettable match that obviously he did like an ultra finisher off the apron that he obviously kicked out of 2 4 minutes into the matchup for a match that was 34 minutes. The top five were matches that clocked in over half an hour. That's not compelling. And sure, I might be getting a lot of flack for this because probably some people like these matches on the YWC, and I'm not trying to crack over or rain on your parade. It's just my opinion, and it's just for God's sakes, at least have a bit of more of a standard over what actually compels people to watch a show and over the personality. Like nobody knows what Okada is. I swear, even Okada doesn't even know what he is. I didn't care about the tag team, the 14 tag team matches you slumped over. At least the parking lot brawl was actually cool. No one was overly compelled over 35 board fets that you keep jacking off the freaking Young Bucks. Note to self: what culture is on the AEW New Japan payroll? I'm sick of y'all just putting my man Dave Belzer. Wrestle Talk is also on the AEW New Japan payroll. I'm just Oh my god, but that's my critique on the top 10 matches of the year for 2020 from What Culture. If you guys like me rubbing into these guys, please comment down below. I hope you all had a happy, great time with your families and loved ones. Merry, whatever. Merry Lake. I hope you guys had a great Christmas. That's it for me.